Hello everyone and welcome to our Gem Pursuit. My name is Matthew Weldon and I'm joined here in our lovely Gem Pursuit studio in Dublin by my trustiest of trusty co-hosts, Elise Ketcher. Good morning, Elise.
Good morning, everyone.
We are recording this episode on Valentine's Day. Obviously, it's not necessarily the day that you'll be listening to it. But that said, we had to share some really interesting love stories.
To get everybody in the romantic spirit, Matthew, we're going to be talking about some historical proposals that have taken place.
Look at our sign. We're in the romantic spirit. Look. Love me do.
Save me, people. SOS. We're also going to be sharing some personal stories from some of our clients from our store, Courtville Antiques. So it's going to be really exciting.
I've never seen as many stories come in, and some of them are so lovely, so beautiful, so thoughtful, and some of them are really hilarious, and some of them I struggle to believe. But anyway, let's get started. Getting started here, Elise, we have to look at, let's go a little bit historical, shall we, before we come to the present day. Of course, people have been falling in love for as long as probably there's been humans, but there's a couple of early stories I think we would want to start off with here today.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that a lot of people think that diamond engagement rings was actually something that was created by De Beers in the 1950s with their slogan, "A diamond is forever." That did create a lot of traction for sure in regards to the diamond solitaire engagement ring. We cannot deny that. However, diamonds and precious stones have been gifted as betrothal gifts since very, very early antiquity. But one of the very first instances that we know of that is documented, and the documents, 32 documents actually, are kept in the Vatican to prove that it happened, is a marriage that took place in Italy. Archduke Maximilian, who was proposing marriage to Mary of Burgundy. That's widely known as, or everybody always uses that story as the first instance of a diamond engagement ring, but it's actually not true.
You know, when we were in Miami there in January, we met with Marion Faisal. She was at the show, actually, and these shows are a great place for, you know, authors, collectors, buyers, dealers, anyone involved in antique jewelry. But she was there, and we actually got a copy of her book, The History of Diamond Engagement Rings, A True Romance. And it detailed the story of Constanza, the first of Sforza. Look, I know we always say about her pronunciation, but we'll just
Matthew's pronunciation is great, so I'm letting him do it.
Well, this is Italian, so it's not going to be great. This particular one comes from the event of their wedding, which is in 1475. So a really early diamond engagement ring, 500 years earlier, 475 years earlier, before the De Beers slogan. So I mean, diamond engagement rings are around for a long time.
But it wouldn't have necessarily looked the way that we expect diamond rings to look today. The cut in which we're really used to seeing, you know, a flat top, a round stone with facets on top and facets on bottom, would not be what was presented to Camilla, who was his betrothed at the time. What was presented to her was a diamond which is called a point cut. Now, the point cut diamond is basically a polished version of the natural shape that comes out of the ground. So we're looking at an octahedra, which is a four-sided pyramid on top of a four-sided pyramid. So it looks like a pyramid to the top and a pyramid to the bottom that is actually connected at the center. In 1475, our understanding of hardness and chemistry and physics is very limited, right? So the way in which to actually tackle the hardness of this particular stone wasn't something that was in our capabilities yet as humans. And so it would have been a quite primitive cut in comparison to what we see today. It would have just been polished using other small diamond pieces to make those sides as polished as possible. And then it would have been placed in gold, but with the points on each side still intact. So this is like incredible for its history, but also it just shows us that human nature kind of hasn't changed since nearly the dawn of time. We're still presenting these kind of gifts to seal a union, and their union in the 15th century was spectacular.
Yeah, I mean, the role of the ring is fundamental. It binds the marriage. It's that symbol of unity. And like, another stones were used as engagement rings as well, like emeralds, sapphires, rubies, but this was, one of the earliest, or the earliest diamond one. And as you said, it was a spectacular ceremony. The general consensus is that we actually can barely imagine the grandeur and the opulence of this particular event.
It says here that it would have lasted for days. There would have been numerous creations of artifacts specifically for the occasion. And in some cases, whole buildings or shops would have been demolished to accommodate just the spectators. So we can't understand that because we don't have anything today that kind of parallels with that in any way. It's completely outside of our understanding. But remembering that these two people are both very elite for their time period. So we're looking at nobles who would have had a lot of wealth, a lot of power, and were, joining together two very prominent households.
In one of these scripts, these 32 scripts that you talk about, there's loads of symbolism. I mean, there's a poem in it, which I'm not going to try and read in Italian. No. It says, 2 wills, 2 hearts, 2 passions are bonded in one marriage by a diamond. And I know that's 1400s, but jewelry shops today are very thankful for that. But it's a beautiful poem though. And the ring, there's lots of images of it and descriptions of it, and it looks really quite incredible.
We could do numerous episodes on proposals, like numerous, because there's so many. However, like this one, we're talking about the marriage ceremony, we're talking about the diamond engagement ring. We don't actually know how the proposal went because that wasn't documented. A lot of the time, especially noble families like this, it's more of a contractual agreement. So it's like, it's protecting lands or it's protecting power. So that's why the proposal and the betrothal happened a lot of the time. However, the next story that we're going to talk about is from the 16th century, and it actually has a story that we know how the proposal actually went. And for the 16th century, this is very progressive.
We're talking about Martin Luther, the German one, theologian. And I remember, he's famously stuck these. We'll get to it now how he got there, but he stuck his 95 ideas about the church onto the door of the church. And I remember in our little textbook there was a little picture, illustrated photo of him doing that. So I always remember that. But I think we need to understand Martin Luther a little bit before we get to the betrothal that you're talking about.
Well, first off, I want to kind of like put a disclaimer, right, for Martin Luther, because he is a really controversial character in many ways. He grew up in quite a prominent family, received an amazing education, and goes into the monastery. When he goes to the Vatican and sees the corruption that's there, he gets really mad because he knows that a lot of people are paying a lot of money into the church. Farmers are, expected to give a lot to the church, and he goes to Rome and basically sees that all of this money is not being used to preach the will of God according to what he's read in the Bible. There's brothels that are actually opened by priests. There's people who have within the clergy who have wives that are hidden wives, these kind of things that he looks at and thinks all of this money, all of this hardship that these people are going through to provide money to the church. And this is where his little piece or large piece of paper comes into play.
The 95 Theses. And when he went to Rome, one of the key catalysts that really just irked him was the sale of what was called indulgences, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are pieces of paper, letters, supposedly signed by the Pope when purchased promised forgiveness of sins. So the church at that time, the most wealthy institution in the world, the Catholic Church, by a margin, I would say. Luther really condemned this particular act, among all the ones you mentioned there, Elise, which I think, the immoral ones, vow of celibacy, and, also Catholic priests still don't get married, which, whatever you view on that is fine, but the point is they were doing it. So you can't have your cake and eat it. And they were.
Martin Luther looked at this and was like, no, I'm going to die on this hill. I know that what's going to happen once I do oppose such a massive organization with power all over the world and endless funds. And of course, in 1521, when it was discovered that he had done this, he was labeled a heretic. And from then on, his life was in danger, even though he had lots of connections and, was protected by those who were firm believers in what he was trying to do. He was opposed at every turn by the Catholic Church. So he continued to work, and these kind of manuscripts and his beliefs were going out to a lot of the different monasteries around. Now, it's important to remember as well that during this particular time period, the church has a lot of power, and we in Ireland still see a lot of that backlash now of how much power the Catholic Church had in Ireland. And that was just a couple of decades ago. We're talking about hundreds of years ago and way more power than what the Catholic Church had here only a couple of decades ago. And that was a lot. So what does that mean? Well, basically, it had a lot of issues, particularly for women in this time period, because women were required for marriage and to create families, and dowries were required for that to happen, which is expensive for families if they have a lot of daughters, and a lot of people couldn't afford to have more than one daughter to marry off. And so when this particular predicament happened, children, women in particular, were given to the monastery as basically as sacrifices.
Wives of the faith, basically. Yeah.
Wives of Jesus.
Wives of Jesus, yeah.
Right, wives of Christ.
Well, thankfully, in your family tree, you didn't live back then, because there's a lot of female energy, a lot of daughters through the generations there.
Well, no, we did live back then, Matthew, but we didn't live in this situation.
No. But I mean, the 3 girls in yours, and I don't know, your mother's side has like 1 million.
Yeah, my mum has 7. My mum is one of 7 daughters. So it would have been nearly impossible for my grandfather to be able to deal with that kind of pressure.
These theses that Martin Luther had, they permeated so quickly. And I'm not sure, but I'm pretty confident that the printing press, as far as I remember, was starting to be developed. The manuscripts, they went far and wide, and they were quite, rebellious, revolutionary ideas. And as they eventually found their way to a nun called, as we said, Katharina von Bora. This is really important, and we don't know much about her background, other than that was a relatively impoverished background.
Well, her mother died when she was 6, is what we know, and that we know that she was given to the monastery when she was 5 or 6 years old.
And then she's married by 16.
to Christ.
To Christ. Bride of Christ. Yeah, sorry. Important detail. Married to be a bride of Christ.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she is brought up in a monastery to become a nun. So that's important to note, is that yes, she takes a vow of poverty, takes a vow of celibacy as nuns do, but she's been brought up from a young age to do so. When these ideas come across to her that she has seen from Martin Luther, she resonates with them. One in particular where he famously says, if nuns are in the cloisters unwillingly, they are forced to suffer greatly, having hell on earth as well as in the future. And so if you're sitting there and you're realizing that you have no power over your future because this is what has been allotted to you, and then you're given these words that give you so much hope for the future, you can imagine trying to grip very tightly onto that kind of freedom if you've been stuck in a place, number one, that you never chose, and number two, is forcing you to be impoverished and celibate against your will.
As you mentioned at the start, Elise, this was quite progressive for the time. And what I find really interesting listening to you there is that although she was a bride of Christ very young, she still had the independence of mind and thinking. She did want out, which you can imagine when you're in something like that from a very young age. I would imagine it'd be difficult to think anything other than what you've been told, really, repeatedly, I'd imagine. But it wasn't just her. It was 8 other women, all decided they wanted to get out.
Let me out.
Let me out. I want to go. This was no easy feat. This wasn't a case of, just get on the next bus because they didn't exist, right?
Well, even here in Ireland, if you wanted out of the laundries, that wasn't a possibility. You know, where do you go?
But even if you could, it's also, where's your support structure where you have nothing to go to? So
some of these nuns asked to go back to their families, and their families refused them. And so they contacted Martin Luther and said, help us, what do we do? And this is where he devises a plan. Because at the time, if you are caught trying to smuggle nuns out of the cloisters, what happens is you're hung, right? So this is the power of the church. You do lose your life if you're trying to assist these women. However, Martin Luther is not scared of that kind of punishment.
No, although granted he didn't do it himself. But
he organised it. So he's
yeah.
still in cahoots with the people who've organised this particular breakout.
Yes, granted he's got his powerful allies as well. But his friend Leonard Koppe, I actually love this story. I think it's great. He enlisted the help of a merchant who delivered barrels of fish to this convent, right? So hidden among the barrels was Leonard, because, the nuns would have to, there's no way of messaging them. They need a messenger to tell them, right, this is how we're getting out. So he smuggles in these barrels of fish. I don't know the logistics of where the fish went or where the women and the nuns in the barrel with the fish.
Well, usually when you're delivering something, you deliver the item and then you take the barrels back with you empty.
Though.
Who cares about the smell? Well, you're sitting there going, oh, I'm going to be smelly. Matthew, it's either that or stay in a celibate house for the rest of your life. What do you want to do?
Well, I actually like seafood, so it's not a problem, right? But the point I'm trying to make,
and impoverished because they're not priests. Priests get to have all of the cool stuff. They can have all of these little gadgets and stuff like that. When you're a nun, you're not allowed to own any earthly possession. You're not allowed to be warm or
the point
fed or anything.
Making is it was a brave escape. It wouldn't have been easy, right? That would have been an uncomfortable situation. It's
I would have been like, put me in that barrel of fish, wrap me up. I don't care if I have to pretend to be a fish. I'm getting out of here. I want my hot chocolate. I want a warm fire. I don't want to be sitting here in this freezing cold place where everybody looks miserable.
Did chocolate exist then? I don't know.
Yes, chocolate existed then, Matthew.
Did it?
Yes.
Okay, hold on. Year chocolate invented.
Oh my gosh. Okay, anyway, moving on. they come out, the women come out of they get into the barrels of fish and it's successful. And Martin Luther is able to find either teaching positions or marriages for all of the women
600 BC.
except for one. And this is the very hard-headed, knows her mind, Catherine von Bora. So she knows her mind, and she's like, no. She's got all of these suitors who are after her because she's a very attractive woman. She's also very smart. And it's not as if there's not people lining up to marry her. There are. But she's like, no, I'm not interested in any of them. And then the ultimatum happens.
She says fundamentally that the only people she is going to marry are either Martin Luther himself or his friend Coppe. So, this is the ultimate. I think the other ones they're all married off, as you said.
Yeah, all of the others got teaching positions or marriages. So they were all very happy out. Everybody's la la la, but she's firm in her. It's you or him or nothing.
Yeah, and I do like that as well. That there's still. It's not just it wasn't a fait accompli. It was still a discussion between them. And, I love Martin Luther's, they're both priests, Catholic priests, right? So they are celibate at the moment as well. So this is a problem for them. But ultimately, Martin Luther says to himself that, I'm not insensible to my flesh or sex, for I'm neither wood nor stone. But my mind is averse to wedlock because I daily expect the death of a heretic. Which ultimately means, I suppose, that he maybe doesn't want to get married in case he's about to die, which maybe wouldn't be the right thing to do. But when he does decide to marry Katharina von Bora, his thought process was it would please his father, it would rile the Pope, it would cause the angels to laugh and the devils to weep. So on the 13th of June, 1525, 26-year-old Katharina von Bora married 41-year-old Martin Luther.
And the rings. So this is a really cool one, right? So obviously, Gem Pursuit, we like to talk about jewelry. I love the history behind the jewelry because this is what makes it sentimental and personal. And this is what jewelry to us really is about. It's about the story. It's about what it's connected to. Why was it given? Why is it designed this way? What's so important about it? And this is what jewelry encapsulates. The two rings that we know of, one in particular, all we have is drawings and the Met webpage, which talks about this particular Gimel ring. Now, I'll quickly go on to tell you what a Gimel ring is about because we want to move on to the other proposals that we want to talk about. The Gimel ring that was gifted is basically two rings that are connected, and then when moved up and together, it actually creates one ring. So obviously that has a lot of meaning in the fact that you've got two rings and then they connect together to make one ring. But originally, the way that Gimel rings worked was you had two separate rings that did come together to make one. However, one ring would have been worn by the man and one ring would have been worn by the woman. And when the two of them were then married, the ring would have been connected together, and then that particular ring would have been worn by either the man or the woman in the relationship. So in this particular case, it's thought that perhaps this Gimel ring was worn by Martin himself. Now, the Gimel ring in particular, this one had written on the inscription on the inside of the band, not on the actual inside, but on the flat side of the band, it had written, "Those whom God hath joined together, let no man put asunder," which of course is the Bible verse. And this was written in German. And then on the top of it, we have a point cut diamond symbolizing the marriage union, which had two hands, and then a ruby on the other side. So this is this particular gimmel ring, if you're looking for examples of really fabulous gimmel rings, I would suggest looking at the Met's collection of gimmel rings. They have one on display that you can actually see in their collection at the Met in New York. Or you can actually go onto their website and they have two fabulous examples. One which is a emerald and ruby piece, and one which is a mourning piece, which has skeletal enamel on it, which is fabulous. This particular gimmel ring was the one that was, that was reassembled, and most likely Martin Luther wore it. Of the two,
I'm thinking about
rings.
finger size. It would nearly have to be.
Well, when you get married, then the ring is joined together, soldered together,
and they can size
and then
it.
they size it.
Okay, yeah.
And then they probably put the additional enamel work.
Obviously they just size it.
Yes.
Like they made it so they can size it. But these ones, at least, they don't exist anymore that we know of.
Not that we know of.
Sorry, they could.
They could exist, but it's not currently that particular gimmel ring is not currently in a collection that we can find.
Which definitely means that it could be in a collection. Things like this do pop up, but this one is so easily distinguished because there is good records of it. I struggle to think why someone would keep that and not have it.
Well, the other option is they had 6 children. So did it get taken apart and one child got the ruby, one child got the diamond, that kind of thing. So we don't know.
It's hundreds of years ago. So
exactly.
it's
we
hard
don't
to
know.
say. But what we do have, and what you can see today, if you happen to be in the Museum of Leipzig in Germany, is their wedding ring, which
was worn by Katharina. It's actually her engagement ring.
That's right. Oh, that's her engagement ring.
Yeah. So this is like so crazy for an engagement ring, right? Katharina's engagement ring is the crucifix with Jesus on the cross, which goes around the finger. On either side of Jesus is all of the devices that were used for torture, which is like on the side of him. Also underneath him, he has 2 dice which are being rolled. And also there is a hammer, nails, and also even one of the mocking crowd is also depicted on this particular engagement ring. Centering in this engagement ring is a ruby, which obviously also kind of red and ruby represents virtuous women, but it also represents passion, love, and blood of Christ. So there's a lot to do here with their faith, which I think shows like their whole story centers around their joint belief in Christianity, but also that Christianity should be open to everybody. And because of Martin Luther's views and his persistence in trying to help those to have their own relationship with Christ, a lot of, even today, the ripples of what he did are seen. We have the Lutheran Church, we have Quakers, we have many different forms of Christianity, and a lot of that has been traced back specifically to this time period and what he did. So it's
huge.
But it's also very symbolic of their relationship and of the time and of what they did. So it makes sense. But when I first saw it, I was like, oh, like who wants to wear like Christ suffering on the cross and all of his torture devices as an engagement ring? But for these two, it kind of just shows you how personal jewelry is, that this it actually fits the couple.
It fits the couple. It's also an amazing ring when you look at the detail. And
yeah, but would you want to wear that? Would you want to wear that as your engagement ring?
That particular one?
Yes. No, you wouldn't. You're such a liar.
Not one that looked like that, but that particular ring. It's so cool. Of course, the history of it for me.
You are such a liar. You would not want to wear that engagement ring. That engagement ring,
sorry, that one's already taken, so it's not going to be a problem. But on the inside, it should be noted it's actually inscribed Katharina v. Bora and then D. Martinus Lutherus. And the date, 13th of June, 1525. And you can see it, as we said, in the Museum of Leipzig in Germany. And do you know what? It's a type of article in a museum that if you didn't understand its significance, you might walk past it. But I think knowing what it is, it's, and knowing the detail in it, if you're ever there, I'd definitely drop in and have a look at that one.
Okay, moving swiftly on. That was wonderful, Matthew. I'm glad you enjoyed your engagement ring of the future. Of the future.
What one would yours be?
It wouldn't be one. Okay, so lastly, we're going to talk about some engagement stories that have come through on our Instagram platform. And this is so fun. I put a question up asking, it's Valentine's Day. Let's talk about some of the proposals that have happened. Because just like these two historical couples, human nature hasn't changed very much. We're still presenting engagement rings, or even just the question to each other, do you want to be together forever, kind of thing. And some of them have done it in spectacular style, and some of them have done them in really sentimental style, and some of them done in really funny style. So we want to talk about a few of them today, and just how sweet.
The variety and sweetness is lovely.
Let's start off with a few that we've seen on Instagram.
Well, one in particular that was at the base of the Matterhorn, which I'm pretty sure is in Switzerland.
It is in Switzerland, yeah.
With a ring that was picked from our store. We'll start off with that one, which I think, you got the backdrop, you've got the grandeur, you got nature. I think it's going to be really cool. Second one, and this one is so Irish. I think I have to give a little bit of context to it, but I really enjoy this one. Again, a beautiful ring picked from Courtville. This one says, in the middle of my parents' forest, there's a fairy fort, and that's where the proposal happened. And for people who don't know about fairy forts, they happen in Ireland, and they're like a sanctuary or like kind of a mystical place. For example, farmers never enter into fairy forts. They're considered to be sacred almost.
I think Matthew has a different perspective of what a fairy fort is to me, because when I first moved to Ireland, I lived in rural Ireland. So I was in between Limerick and Clare in a place called Annacrusha. And in Annacrusha, fairy forts were a place to be respected, a place that was considered magical, and a place that was connected to Celtic pagan traditions. And I remember being in a pub in Ireland and in Annacrusha, and I remember the farmers talking about, oh yeah, if you walk into a fairy fort and you break a twig, prepare for your leg to be broken the next day.
Yeah, no,
they have a very specific reverence,
but it's very real. Like it's very much respected.
Yeah, they have a reverence,
a special place,
a reverence for it. Now, it's not that they don't walk into it; it's that they respect it. Now, you can always tell what a fairy fort looks like because it actually has like disturbed ground. So the ground kind of is either in a circular pattern, and it has like a lip, like a fort, like you see in a castle fort, but made out of earth. And usually around that earth or inside the center of the circle is trees, either on the outside or on the inside or both of the fort. And they can be some of the most beautiful locations in Ireland. If you're driving through the countryside, you'll see a lot of the time these forts like on top of a hill or in the middle of a field where everything else in the field is being cleared out, but the fairy fort hasn't been cleared out. So it's a really sweet place to do it, especially if it has significance to the family, because again, like I said, it's a place of reverence for a lot of Irish people.
other examples. One here I think is a really sweet one as well. And sometimes it can be something simple, it doesn't have to be, there's some really great, like extravagant ones, which we'll get to. But this one, woke up early, went to Newgrange, which is a Neolithic tomb in Ireland. This person says, I was so annoyed. I was in shock, to be honest, with his proposal. So I like that. And there's another one that actually says...
well, I mean, it is like, if you're not prepared for it, that's one thing that we talk about with a lot of clients who come in. Sometimes I say to them, like, maybe don't plan something solid for a certain day, because sometimes the opportunity presents itself and it's the right moment. But sometimes you organize something and you both might not be feeling each other that day. Like there's another one in here where they're in Sicily and they were in a fight, but he had organized a photographer for the engagement already.
Look happy.
So
you better look happy.
So you're like in the middle of a fight in Sicily, and then all of a sudden somebody's taking a photo of you and you're being asked a very important question. Now, like, now you can laugh about it because it's like you're not in this situation anymore. But I think it's important to remember that, like, if sometimes you can over plan yourself, and
flexibility in the moment is always good. But always as well, like if you're going away for the proposal and you've got the ring in your pocket, you can't enjoy your holiday until the deed is done, right? So if you're waiting till the end of your holiday, you're going to be acting very weird for the majority of the holiday, and it's going to be like, why are you carrying around that little bag with you the whole time? Or why you're wearing a jacket? It's 35 degrees, which is, I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but hot, very hot, like the 90s, desert, like Nevada
90s,
hot.
90s.
So it's hot. Let's see what other ones we got here. We lived in London, went out for the day, and the day ended in front of St. Paul's.
Yes, that's so sweet as well, because it's like a moment in time in your life where you may not be living in that location forever, but it's maybe where you met. And St. Paul's Cathedral is just so stunning.
Yeah, that would be.
It's such a incredible landmark in London.
In Connemara by the sea, it rained all day, and then suddenly the sky opened up and the sun was beaming. I've been to Connemara. It's pretty rainy. We all know Michel Sardou's song, Les Lacs du Connemara.
I don't think we all know that song, Matthew. Sorry.
Français.
We all know that song.
Well, you should listen to it. It's really good. It's pretty much, I think it's it's very important in France anyway.
Also, the marathon one. We've got someone here who proposed after running a 42-kilometer marathon and had a token ring on them whilst they were running the marathon. Like,
serious chafage there, I'd say.
No, but also, like, it's a huge moment for the person who's actually run the marathon. Very selfless to kind of like give that
focus onto the other person.
Exactly, which is really sweet. I found that.
It's normally like, well done, you did a marathon. But actually,
nice. No, I'm going to propose to you at like on a pinnacle of something that I've achieved, which is really nice.
Here's an interesting one. He proposed on a floating bar in the Caribbean Sea.
All of the pictures that I saw of floating bars in the Caribbean Sea, you'd say yes to pretty much anything. It was beautiful out there. This one's really funny. I was laughing at this one. Proposal story. I'm at my grand's grave, and it was such a surprise that I puked with shock/excitement. Very memorable. I thought that was hilarious and a great story to tell family, friends, your children. Hilarious.
It's like there's happy crying and sad crying. This is happy puking.
Also, a lot of New York proposals.
Yes.
So walking across Manhattan Bridge to dinner. It was cloudy all day, but the sun lent itself at sunset. And the Manhattan Bridge is gorgeous. Also in New York, but on a ferry at sunset with a ring from Courtville. Other destinations was Ha Long Bay in Vietnam, which was on a cruise. Hawaii at a volcano. Also proposed to my now husband under the Eiffel Tower and he had no clue whatsoever.
Oh.
I thought that was really, really sweet.
I also thought our daughter come crawling up to me with her onesie that says, "Will you marry Papa?" I've never seen as many comments from an Instagram post, Elise.
It's nostalgic for people, you know. It's probably one of the happiest moments that you can have as a couple. Obviously, it's not the happiest moment because you're always having happy moments together, but it's very memorable because it's something that you always revisit. So the way in which some of them happened, actually one of them as well, which was not at any crazy destination, or one of them was two farmers that were out in the cowshed, and just after the feeding, he proposed in the cowshed, and they were both in their farmer's clothes, and, you know, a key moment in their life that is a moment that is perfect for them. So that's what I think this whole episode has been about, is about what has suited the couple, what's perfect for the couple, just like the engagement ring that, you know, that Katharina wore was perfect for her and for their situation. It's very similar to the modern day love stories that we've talked about today, and how perfect their locations were for what's happening in their lives. And, you know, for Valentine's Day, it's the perfect way for us to reminisce with them.
So with that, we are going to wrap up this episode of Gem Pursuit. I'd like to thank everyone who listened to us. As usual, Elise, thank you very much for today.
Thank you, Matthew.
To our researchers, Fenia and Veronique our podcast manager as well. And of course, Ross, I haven't forgot you, our producer. Thank you, everyone. For me, Matthew Wellen, your host. Talk to you next time.